After a crazy night of FPL price changes with Nkunku's price falling and popular players like Smith Rowe and Madueke rising in price, we need to talk about exactly what to do with our players going into Game Week 3 and the best players to buy for your teams. As a fellow Nkunku owner, I'm also going to talk through my transfer plans. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do smash that like button, aim for 300 on this video. And of course, make sure you do subscribe to the channel for daily fantasy content. And enough waffling. Let's get into today's video. So first up, a quick reminder of how we got on in Game Week 2. It ended up being 81 points for the team. I ended up sending Solanke for Muniz, and I was pretty happy with the move. He did get one of the most shots in Game Week 2, just couldn't put the ball in the net. But 81 points, 1.7 million in the world, a green arrow. I am more than happy with the start that we've had so far in the opening 2 game weeks. And a quick run through of the players. Henderson just doesn't look the right goalkeeper, but there aren't many attractive goalkeepers right now, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we can get by until the wild card and maybe pick up a valuable clean sheet between now and then. Clearly, Rowe was the choice with those bonus points that he is picking up. In terms of the defenders, a full house. Saliba with the clean sheet, Robinson with the assist, and a couple of bonus points is worth adding, and Trent with that clean sheet as well. Thankfully getting the right defenders, but it does seem like we are blessed with quite a lot of brilliant premium defenders in the game as we speak. In terms of the midfielders, Saka continuing to tick over. Could have been a bit more, but I'm happy with that, especially away against Aston Villa. That was the one fixture that I looked at and thought he probably isn't going to have a huge ceiling in that game. Nkunku with the 1-pointer, let's be real, that is going to be the topic of this video today, so we're going to come on to that later on. Smith Rowe with those delicious 10 points. Really happy to start with that combination of Smith Rowe and Rodgers on the bench after seeing so many managers buying them coming into Game Week 3. Really happy that I trusted those assets at their price points. Smith Rowe coming in clutch for those 10 points. And Jota with the 6-pointer, honestly, underlying numbers were fantastic, better than Mo Salah's once again. And even though people are clambering to get Mo Salah into their teams, personally, as a Diogo Jota owner, looking at the numbers, I'm actually really happy with what I've seen right now. And I don't feel that much FOMO not having Mo Salah in my team. And finally, Haaland with that hat-trick, delivering when we needed it, especially with Mo Salah delivering in Game Week 1. Us Haaland owners needed those returns, and congratulations to anybody that did triple captain. Please let me know in the comment section if you're one of those managers. Isak with a 2-pointer, that is a discussion that we need to have as well. And Muniz, the new boy, happy with what I saw, to be honest. You definitely could have scored in Game Week 2. But all in all, 81 points, more than happy with the game week. But we, of course, do have a few issues with the team that we do need to address going into Game Week 3, in particular, a certain Christopher Nkunku. So what to do with Nkunku? Now, it's worth noting, last night was a busy one for price changes, and I know maybe a lot of you watching this right now have already sold Christopher Nkunku, because if you didn't know, his price fell to 6.4 million. Meanwhile, some popular replacements like Smith Rowe, like Madueke were predicted to rise in price, and naturally managers didn't want to miss out on a price swing where it could have been 0.2 million, and eventually come Game Week 3 we might see another price fall for Nkunku, and then it starts to get really sticky as a situation if you do own him. So I think the first thing we need to address is, what do we actually do with Nkunku before even looking at alternatives out there? So a reminder, this is the team that featured for Chelsea against Wolves. Nkunku didn't start, which is a problem. We've had Mudryk start ahead of him. We've, of course, seen Jackson play as the number 9. We're seeing Madueke play on the right wing and Cole Palmer operating as the 10. Now, this is a real problem, because I think when we were looking at this Chelsea team off the back of Game Week 1, our assumption was that Madueke wasn't going to be a starter because he was going to be sold. That meant Cole Palmer playing off the right, most likely Pedro Neto playing off the left longer term. So we had that number 10 role basically allocated to Nkunku. Happy days. But things have changed. We've now seen João Felix be signed, who absolutely can play in that number 10 and most likely will do so. We're now seeing Madueke most likely stay at Chelsea, which is going to be the ideal right winger for Enzo Maresca, which now means we have 3 players competing for that number 10 position. Now, of course, all 3 of those players, Nkunku, Cole Palmer and João Felix, can play as a 10. They can play off the left and they can play down the middle. So we definitely can see a world at times where Nkunku is going to play as a 10 or off the left. But my problem is the minutes. There are too many players for so little positions, especially, and I'm going to put it out there, where Cole Palmer is basically undroppable. I think of all the assets right now, of course, being priced at 10.5 million, he is the most expensive, but you pay for what you get. This is the guy who's going to get 90 minutes pretty much every single game week. He is going to be the heart of everything Chelsea do, and I do think he is justifiable of the price if you want to go there. But I understand with the premium assets available in the game with Haaland and Salah, very hard to squeeze a Cole Palmer in your team. But if you don't want to have the headache, Palmer is the route to go for. Now, the big question everybody's asking right now is, do we sell Nkunku right now? And I think the answer is yes. I'm going to be honest with you. I think selling Nkunku is the right move for your FPL teams, whether it be in game week 3 or whether it be in game week 4. When we take a look at the fixtures coming up, Palace at home in game week 3 is a brilliant fixture for attackers. But can I sit here right now and confidently tell you that he is going to play in game week 3? The answer is no. Chelsea have a game on Thursday night away against Servette. Now, one of the narratives we had is that Nkunku played in the first leg, plays 60 minutes. We all thought that was happy days. That meant that he was going to be rested for the start in game week 2, but that never came to fruition. So whatever happens in the second leg against Servette for Nkunku, I don't think that is going to actually give us an answer of whether he is going to play in game week 3. So he's a minutes risk, which is a problem. Then in game week 4, away against Bournemouth, followed by West Ham. I think we want a piece of this Chelsea attack. We just don't truly know where to go, apart from Cole Palmer. And I think that is going to be my answer about whether you go to a Chelsea midfielder. Looking at the stats right now, of course, we're only looking at a 2-game week sample. And for players like João Felix and for people like Madueke, they've only actually played 1 game, which is so hard to draw conclusions from. Now, everybody's going to be talking about Madueke because 0.98 XG is fantastic. And he really did look electric in that game. And the quotes coming from Enzo Maresca, he stated publicly that Madueke is the kind of winger that he likes. He likes 1v1 dribblers, players that are able to actually hog the touchline and come in. And he basically is the dream winger. And if he doesn't get sold in the transfer window, I do expect him to compete on that right wing and probably have the number 1 shirt there, which means Cole Palmer comes into the 10 and then it gets messy. So I actually think if you have to go Chelsea, if you can get to Cole Palmer, obviously you go there. But let's be real, I don't think you have the money available. I would pick Madueke. I think João Felix is a problem. I think Neto's going to be a problem. I think Madueke has the biggest chance of taking that shirt on that right-hand side and playing consistently. But would I do Nkunku to a Chelsea midfielder? Personally, no. I think there is too much of a lottery right now to get the right one. If you get the right 6.5, I think it could be FPL gold. But I just don't know which one is the correct one to go for with so many fantastic options available and Osman still being rumoured to come to Chelsea. So for me, if you're going to sell Nkunku, it's either Cole Palmer at Chelsea or you go to another team. So 2 players that I see a lot of managers going to, and it's worth noting, I already own both of these in my Game Week 1 team. So obviously I am not looking to buy these, but I thought it would be worth me dropping in a section like this because I am conscious that people out there maybe don't have one or either of these players, and you maybe have a little bit of a deliberation on which one to go for. Now, I need to state this first and foremost. Smith Rowe is actually 5.6 million. Rodgers is 5 million. So, of course, that is something that we do need to take into account when we're looking at the 2 players. You are going to save a bit of money if you were to opt for Morgan Rodgers rather than that of Smith Rowe. And that does make a big difference. So, looking at the underlying numbers for both players, it needs to be said, Rodgers has started both games and played 90 minutes in both. Smith Rowe has started both but come off early in both games. So in terms of the numbers, XG per 90, Smith Rowe leading the way at 0.3 compared to Rodgers' 0.15. Shots though in Rodgers' favour, 2.5, which is decent shot volume to be honest with you. In terms of the shots in the box, again, in Rodgers' favour, and also Rodgers being a bit more of a chance creator in this Aston Villa team. Both players playing very similar roles for their respective teams. Smith Rowe in that 10, Rodgers almost as a dual forward or a 10 if you want to look at it at times. And if anybody has been watching Aston Villa's games, even though Rodgers is the one that hasn't actually delivered FPL points, he has been fantastic on the eye. He has been so powerful. And when you actually look at the game, even though he isn't actually delivering, the underlying numbers are okay, especially for a 5 million player. And actually on the eye test, I think we're looking at it thinking there is going to be a big surprise if Unai Emery was to drop Rodgers at any point right now. So he is ticking all of the boxes right now. But Smith Rowe is the one that is actually getting the FPL points at the time of recording in Game Week 2. So take a look at the fixtures, because that is important. Fixtures are king, especially when we're buying cheap alternatives, because we need to look at which ones we could bench at times and which ones we would like to start. So coming into game week 3, let's be real. Whichever one of these you buy, you are looking to start away against Leicester or away against Ipswich. After that, Fulham have West Ham, who I think are going to become a bit more of a defensively sound team with some of the purchases that they made, like Wan-Bissaka at right back. I think they've picked up some good players. Then Newcastle at home in game week 5. Just coming off the back of that disappointing game against Bournemouth, I think there could be opportunities for Fulham. But is it a great game? I'm probably going to say no to that. Then away against Nottingham Forest in game week 6, followed by some trickier fixtures in game week 7 and 8. But to be honest with you, I imagine there'll be a wildcard activated around that point. In terms of Morgan Rogers, I would argue that the next 4 fixtures are actually better. I think Leicester away is not a bad fixture. Everton at home and Wolves at home, who've just conceded 6 goals against Chelsea, I think are great fixtures. And then they have, similar to what Fulham have in game week 3, with Ipswich away in game week 6, followed by a bit of a trickier run after that. So for me, at the time, I think Rodgers is actually the preference if I didn't own either one. I do think Smith Rowe is a fantastic pick, but I think there's more chance of having an early substitution for Smith Rowe. I think there is more chance of getting 90 minutes each and every week from Rodgers. I think the fixtures are better, and I think all round as a package, I just feel a bit more confident going to Rodgers at a slightly cheaper price. I think if they were a similar price, then it might be a different story, but I think Rodgers is offering too much FPL value right now, and it frees up 0.5 million extra that you can invest elsewhere in your team. So I'm a very happy FPL owner to have both on my side, but if I had to pick one going into game week 3, it would be Morgan Rogers. Let me know your pick in the comment section. So moving into my own Nkunku replacement, because as I've stated, I do think Nkunku is a sell. But the big question is, do you sell him in game week 3 or do you sell him in game week 4? Now, of course, if you do hold him in game week 3, you are taking a risk of a double price drop. I would not be surprised with the way that he's being sold right now, that we start the week at 6.5. He's already gone down to 6.4. And I could see him being 6.3 come the Saturday deadline. So you are taking a big risk with value in a player if you were to hold him beyond game week 3. That is just a realistic part of it that you need to consider. But with my team right now, as I stated, I already have Smith Rowe and I already have Morgan Rogers, 2 of the appealing options at a cheaper price point. So we need to take a look at the fixtures. We're looking at the next 4 games. I've taken out some of the teams that realistically we're just not going to buy from, like a Southampton, for example. And I'm only looking at the next 4 game weeks because realistically, I could play my wildcard in game week 4. I could play it in game week 6. I don't see myself playing the wildcard beyond game week 6. So I'm only looking at a very short-term view of where to bring in players. Now, looking at game week 3 in isolation, because of course, I want to actually buy a player that has a favourable fixture this game week, ideally. Aston Villa already, I believe, have the best midfielder and the same as Fulham. So I'm not going to be considering the top 2 teams that have the best fixtures, even though I, of course, would like to bring in another Aston Villa midfielder. I just don't feel comfortable having anyone outside of Morgan Rogers. So beyond that, it doesn't feel like the right game week to invest in Brighton, even though there are fantastic options in Matoma and Minter. You can go there, but the question poses, is it really worth bringing in someone like that who you don't think is going to deliver just a bench? I don't really like the idea of that. Liverpool, I think Luis Diaz is proposing an amazing option as going for a double up in Diogo Jota. And even though it is Man United away, I actually don't think it's a bad transfer bringing him in this week. But again, is it the best week to do it? Probably not, especially with game week 4 being the one to target in your teams. Brentford, great fixture in game week 3, but I think a lot of people are just looking at game week 3 and not considering game week 4 and 5. If you're in a position where you're looking to wildcard in game week 4, I absolutely think if you got the money, Nkunku to an Mbeumo is a fantastic move, but you're kind of committing yourself to a wildcard in game week 4. Chelsea we touched on, I don't need to talk about that section. Bournemouth with Semenyo, Tavernier offering brilliant value, but once again, Chelsea, Liverpool in game weeks 4 and 5 just doesn't really feel like the best use of the midfield slot in this team, especially with Smith Rowe and Rodgers being cheap alternatives already. Do I want to bring in another 5.5 million midfielder with 1.5 in the bank? I don't think so. I want to keep that option in the mid-price category to allow myself to be flexible in future game weeks. Man United, I don't feel confident going there right now, even though Garnacho is doing well. There's still too much rotation in that team, and Bruno Fernandes just is out of my price range. Crystal Palace, I know a lot of people are selling Eze, but I do believe Eze is still a great purchase. Chelsea, even though they scored 6, could have conceded 4. And I do expect Crystal Palace to be a problem for Chelsea in game week 3. In terms of Forest, yes, Gibbs White is a consideration, but I just don't really feel like the time is now to buy Nottingham Forest. I think it was back in game week 1 if you were to buy them. Arsenal doesn't feel like the right time to buy because even though game week 3 is good, 4 and 5 is just sticky, and I don't think you want another Arsenal player. Newcastle doesn't feel right to buy at the time. City, I have no idea which one to buy, to be honest with you. And finally, West Ham, let's be real. Souček is catching people's eyes at 5 million, but do I want to have 2 5 millions and 1 5.5 million midfielder in my team? The answer is no. Bowen could be good, maybe Kudus, but the fixtures just don't give me attraction. So what I'm trying to say here right now is, even though there are going to be possibly multiple price drops for Christopher Nkunku, maybe is actually rolling the transfer and getting myself 2 free transfers in game week 4 for those brilliant fixture swings, which allows me to then keep the wildcard in my back pocket for later game weeks. We can see here, if I was to roll the transfer, it means that maybe I could bring in Ollie Watkins and do an Nkunku transfer to target those brilliant Aston Villa fixtures for game week 4 onwards. And it gives me one more game week of information to see if Watkins is still an early substitute. It means that I can bring in those Brighton midfielders without having to bring him in with that Arsenal game and identify whether Minter or Matoma is the one to go for. It also means that I could bring in Luis Diaz if I want to, off the back of one more game against Man United, which even though Man United are a ropey team, I still don't love bringing in Luis Diaz away against Man United this week, but I could bring him in for Forest and Bournemouth. So right now, controversially, I think rolling the transfer is actually a viable move for my Nkunku replacement. So with the 3 players that I highlighted here in terms of my Nkunku replacement, I don't want to go to Chelsea. I just don't feel confident going there. And I think Matoma, Eze and Luis Diaz are the ones that are actually appealing to me. Now, again, I have 1.5 million, so I'm in a position where I can allow these players to fall in price in the shape of Nkunku and be okay with it affording these. My only issue is, of course, now, if I go to Luis Diaz, I then can't make the Alexander Isak to Watkins move. So if you go Diaz, you kind of are all in. You don't have the luxury of then doing Isak to Watkins because I don't have the money in the bank. Whereas if I go for Matoma, if I go for Eze, it still allows that sideways move of doing Isak to Watkins. And that's something that we definitely need to keep in the back of our mind when we're making our transfers. What impact does that one transfer have on the next one? And that's my only hesitancy with going for Luis Diaz right now. I allowed Nkunku to fall to 6.4. If I go Diaz now, it is going to price me out of making potentially a future move of Isak to Watkins. So we need to be careful of that situation. But in terms of the 3 right now, just look at the numbers in the opening 2. You can see why I am tempted by Luis Diaz. His XG of 1.63 is amazing. And also his expected assists of 1.09. He has been the standout Liverpool midfielder. Even though he had a bad game week 1 from an FPL points perspective, he definitely should have got some hauls in game week 1 alongside this. And we'll be sat here looking at 22-pointer and everybody clambering to get Luis Diaz in their teams. Matoma, super interesting, but as I stated, away against Arsenal just doesn't feel like the right time to bring in Matoma. I'd actually rather roll my transfer, allow a price drop, gain one more game week of information, and then maybe look to go there. But Matoma is absolutely on my radar for game week 4 and 5. And finally, Eze. I wanted to bring him up because probably people are laughing right now at me bringing in Eze into my team. But 12 shots, 8 of those in open play, 0.94 XG, 0.3 expected assists. On another day, you can see that his expected FPL points is 10.09 and he's only got 4. So on another day, this guy is one of the most bought players going into game week 3 because he has Chelsea. But let's be real, Chelsea defensively are all over the place right now. So these are the 3 that I'm considering. But I'm going to be honest, right now, I'm actually considering for my own team rolling the transfer and allowing myself some flexibility in game week 4. So taking a look at my game week 3 team right now without any transfers, I think the team picks itself. Henderson away against Chelsea, not ideal, but it is what it is. Hopefully we do get at least some save points in that game. The defence I'm more than happy with. Yes, Trent is away against Man United, but I think his attacking potential is too good to obviously be benching him. Let's be real. If you're spending 7 million, you're starting him in every single fixture. And I think Arne Slot's Liverpool is starting to control games a lot better than that of Jurgen Klopp's. That I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool were to pick up a clean sheet in that game against Man United. I think they can handle the transitions a bit better than what they would have done in previous years. Robertson away against Ipswich, more than happy with that, especially what we saw in game week 2. And Saliba at home against Brighton, maybe his last game in my team, but more than happy to keep him for that fixture, even though Brighton have been very good offensively. Hopefully we can make it 3 clean sheets in a row. In terms of the midfielders, we're using the 2 budget enablers in Rodgers and Smith Rowe. While other managers are bringing them into their teams, I already have both of them. So I've got a bit of the best of the both worlds, and I kind of trust them, even though they are cheap enablers. Jota away against Man United, again, more than content with playing him. I do not see him losing his position at all. And then we have Saka at home against Brighton. Again, a brilliant fixture for him. And to be honest with you, the vice-captaincy most likely would be on Bukayo Saka. In terms of the front 3, Muniz away against Ipswich. I always brought him in for a 4-game week period, so this is game 2 of him in my team. Haaland away against West Ham with the captaincy, and Alexander Isak at home against Spurs. Now, I see a lot of problems with people right now with Isak wanting to sell him. Personally, I'm happy to give him another game. I don't think Spurs defensively are absolutely watertight. At St James's Park, I always back Newcastle, even though they had a disappointing game week 2. They've always struggled for some reason away against Bournemouth. So I think Isak at home against Spurs is a game that you just keep. I know there's going to be some temptation to go to someone like a Watkins, but while he continues to be substituted around the 60th, 65th minute, you know at least with Isak you're getting 90 minutes on penalties and a good fixture for attacking assets. And I think you keep Isak for 1 more week, and then we reassess in game week 4 when Aston Villa have a really good fixture and we decide whether it is best to actually sell Isak in that period. He has been definitely the most disappointing. In terms of my bench, you can see Nkunku at home against Crystal Palace. Now again, we've got the game on Thursday night. We might get some understanding on basically what is happening with that Chelsea team there. But my assumption right now is Nkunku is just a sell in our teams, as I've spoken about. But right now, I feel like rolling my transfer, giving myself 2 free transfers in game week 4 is the best use of it for my own team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What are your plans with Nkunku? I'll be super interested to know. I want to quickly show you how my team could look in the upcoming game weeks with my plan of rolling it going into game week 4. So take a look at my team for game week 3. We've already discussed how we are looking, but it's important to show you what my team would look like for game week 4. So coming into game week 4, you would see my team would look something like this, which I am more than content with. Obviously, the issue is Arsenal versus Spurs, but it is what it is sometimes. But they could be sold in a game week 4 double of my transfers, because again, rolling my transfer is going to allow me to have 2 free transfers you can see at the top of the screen and 1.5 million available. Nkunku would have to be a sell in this team. So if we were looking to sell him right now, because we can't be keeping him for another game week, that really is asking for problems. So selling Nkunku, as I first spoke about, could allow me to have Luis Diaz come into the team, and then we would look to bring him in, potentially even for a Bukayo Saka, which seems a little bit crazy, but he could come in for a Saka if we worried about the Spurs. But let's, for now, take out Smith Rowe. I'd have my double Liverpool with some great fixtures coming up. The only problem, and I wanted to touch on this, was you can see here the money available is now 0.4 million. And if I was to bring in someone like an Ollie Watkins for their great run of fixtures, if we saw some good stuff in game week 3, selling Isak to Watkins actually isn't on the cards unless the FPL gods give me a chance. What I'm saying is this. Watkins right now is priced at 9 million. However, at the time of recording, he is expected to fall in price to 8.9 million. I am praying this happens and he has a quiet game week 3. If that does happen, then Luis Diaz coming in if he doesn't have a price rise and Watkins' price falling allows me to do Nkunku to Luis Diaz and Isak to Watkins in game week 4. Any sort of price changes, then unfortunately the kind of combination is out of the window. So that is something that I'm considering, which will actually give me a really strong team. But I am conscious that I kind of need to get really lucky with the team. Then coming into game week 5, we have our issue with the Arsenal players once again away against Man City. But if we're in the opinion right now that maybe, obviously, wildcard in game week 6 is the move, I could look to sell Saka for a 1 game week punt and bring in any sort of player that has a fantastic fixture, whether it be an Aston Villa midfielder, but I don't really know what route we would go for, or a Brighton midfielder in the shape of Matoma. So as you can see, what I'm trying to say is that there is lots of flexibility with my team. The other move that I can make in game week 4 is bringing in, as I mentioned, someone like a Matoma, which is going to give me some money in the bank still to play with at 1.3 million. It means that I would bring in Matoma for a Smith Rowe. And to be honest with you, if I was completely tied down to a wild card in game week 6, I could also play my other transfer here, sell Bukayo Saka, and bring in still a Luis Diaz into my team. And again, my team would then look something like this. I'd have Luis Diaz instead of Saka. I would be able to keep Matoma for his home game against Ipswich. I still have Alexander Isak, but is that a terrible game away against Wolves? No. And we always know what FPL's like. When a player's doing bad, everybody sells him, and eventually they do return to the norm. So maybe that would be a situation. Then coming into game week 5, we would have some really favourable games. Matoma away against Forest, Diaz at home against Bournemouth, Isak would be away against Fulham, which isn't a terrible fixture, and the team would kind of pick itself once again. Saliba having a tricky game, maybe we would substitute him for Lewis Hall. So I can take my team in 1-2 ways. I can go for Luis Diaz and Watkins if the team was really lucky. Otherwise, I can go for a Matoma-Diaz combination in game week 4. What I'm trying to say is I think rolling the transfer for me is the best move for my team. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's game week 3 transfer plans video. A little bit of a longer one, but I do think it was worthwhile with so much crazy stuff happening in FPL and a lot of people panicking on what to do with their teams. Hopefully this video has given you a little bit of clarity, and if it hasn't, please do put the questions in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them over the next 24, 48 hours. You have no problems with that. As always, if you enjoyed this longer format, please do make sure you drop a like on the video, aim for 300. And of course, if you can smash that subscribe button, it is always massively appreciated. Have an amazing day. We'll talk in tomorrow's video. Take care. Cheers.